The bar was thick with smoke and the sour stench of spilled beer. A jukebox hummed faintly in the corner, drowning under the roar of laughter from the Steel Wolves biker gang. Their boots thudded against the floorboards like war drums, their voices echoing through Murphy's Tavern, a place that used to feel safe. Maya sat near the bar, her head bowed, nursing a glass of water she hadn't touched. She always chose the darkest corner, the kind where people forgot you were there. It was easier that way. No eyes on her, no questions about the scars she kept hidden under long sleeves. But Rex Morrison, leader of the Steel Wolves, wasn't the kind of man to ignore anyone, especially not someone who didn't flinch when he barked. He swaggered over, his leather vest hanging loose over his tattooed chest, his breath thick with whiskey. "Hey, sweetheart," he drawled, leaning too close. "Why so quiet? You hiding something under there?" Maya didn't answer. She'd learned silence could keep the peace. But silence didn't work on men like Rex. His smirk widened. He reached for her arm, tugging at her sleeve. She pulled back, sharp and quick. The movement only made him grin. "Feisty," he said, his voice carrying across the bar. The bikers hooped and jeered, eager for a show. Then, in a move faster than she could stop, he grabbed the front of her shirt and yanked. The fabric tore with a sharp rip. Gasps cut through the air. For a split second, the room froze. The tattoo on her shoulder blade, normally hidden beneath layers of cloth, gleamed in the dim light. A black sword piercing through lightning bolts, the unmistakable mark of Delta Force. The Steel Wolves went silent. Conversations died mid-word. Even the jukebox seemed to fall quiet. Murphy, the tavern's grizzled owner, dropped the glass he was drying. It shattered on the counter, his eyes wide. Rex's smirk faltered. "What the hell is that?" he muttered, though his voice had lost its swagger. Maya stood slowly, her breathing steady, though inside her chest a storm raged. The room watched her, waiting. "You wanted to know what I was hiding," she said quietly, her voice steady but edged with steel. "Now you do." No one moved. Even the bikers shifted uneasily, the weight of recognition settling on them. They all knew what that tattoo meant. It wasn't just ink. It was earned in blood and fire, in battles most men wouldn't survive. Rex tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "So what? You think some tattoo makes you tough?" He shoved her shoulder roughly, but his bravado was already slipping. Maya's eyes didn't waver. She had promised herself she'd never fight again, never let her past spill into her present. But something in the way Rex grinned, in the way his men laughed, cracked through her restraint. The memories hit. Sand, smoke, screams, the night her squad didn't all make it back. She felt the weight of it pressing down. But instead of folding, she straightened. Her voice was low, but it carried across the room. "I don't need a tattoo to prove I'm tough. I'm still standing. That's proof enough." The tavern held its breath. Then Rex lunged. His hand shot forward, aiming to grab her throat, to reassert the power that had slipped through his fingers. But Maya wasn't just standing anymore. She moved. In one fluid motion, she caught his wrist, twisted, and slammed his arm down against the counter. The crack echoed through the bar, his howl splitting the air. His men surged forward but froze when she pivoted, yanking Rex off balance and locking him in a hold so precise, so practiced that it was obvious. She wasn't just a survivor. She was trained. The bikers hesitated. Fear flickered in their eyes. None of them wanted to be the first to step closer. Murphy finally found his voice. "Enough!" he shouted, his tone cutting through the tension. His hands shook as he gripped the bar, but his voice didn't waver. "You've brought trouble into my tavern for the last time, Rex. Get out before you lose more than your pride." Maya released Rex with a shove. He stumbled back, clutching his arm, his face twisted in rage and humiliation. "This ain't over," he spat, backing toward the door. "You'll regret showing that tattoo. You'll regret crossing me." He stormed out, his men following, though not as eagerly as usual. The door slammed behind them, leaving the tavern in heavy silence. Maya's chest rose and fell slowly, but her face betrayed nothing. She pulled her torn shirt tighter around her, covering the tattoo once more. The room still stared, the weight of what they had seen pressing down. Murphy's voice came softly, almost reverent. "Delta Force." She didn't answer. She just sat back down as if nothing had happened. But the quiet inside her wasn't peace. It was memory, gunfire, screams, the lives she couldn't save. The tattoo had spoken louder than she ever intended. And though the fight had ended, something told her this was just the beginning. That night, after the last stool had been turned upside down on the bar and the broken glass swept into bins, Murphy locked the tavern door with a heavy sigh. The neon sign clicked off, leaving only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the low creak of the old wood floors. Maya sat in the far booth, her torn shirt folded neatly beside her, wearing Murphy's spare flannel draped around her shoulders. The adrenaline had long since burned out, leaving her hollow but restless. She stared at her hands, the knuckles still sore from the brief clash with Rex. Murphy limped over, his cane thudding softly, and slid into the booth across from her. He didn't speak at first. He just poured them both a shot of whiskey and slid one glass across the table. "You didn't tell me," he finally said. His voice wasn't accusing, just heavy, like the weight of the night had settled deep into his bones. Maya didn't touch the glass. "I didn't plan to." Murphy studied her for a moment. His hair was more silver than black now, his lined face shadowed by the dim light. "Delta Force isn't just a tattoo. It's a lifetime. You carry that, people are gonna look at you different." "I didn't want them to look at me at all." Her voice was flat, but inside the memories clawed at her. She had joined the army at 19, full of fire and certainty. When they asked for volunteers for something tougher, something most men wouldn't even attempt, she raised her hand. Delta Force had been her proving ground, a place where every day demanded more than most people could give. And she gave it over and over until one night in Kandahar when the blast threw her to the ground and the world went black. She saw it as she spoke, sand spraying into the air, the deafening crack of the explosion, the heat and smoke choking her lungs. She remembered dragging Specialist Williams by his vest while bullets whined overhead, his blood soaking her arms. She remembered turning back for the others and realizing there wasn't time. Not enough hands, not enough strength. And she remembered the silence after, the kind that eats at you when you realize you made it out, but not all of them did. She rubbed her forearm unconsciously, where the shrapnel scars ran jagged under the skin. "I came here to disappear, Murphy. To work in the back, to serve drinks, to fade into the wallpaper. That tattoo wasn't supposed to see the light again." Murphy leaned back, exhaling slow. "You can try to disappear, kid. But truth has a way of finding the light. Especially when you're carrying something like that." Maya finally lifted the glass, staring at the amber liquid before setting it down again. "They'll come back," she said. "Rex isn't the type to let it go." "No," Murphy agreed. "But neither are you." For a long time, neither of them spoke. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Inside, the weight of unspoken memories sat heavy between them. The next morning, word had already spread. By the time Maya stepped out to buy groceries, people were whispering in the aisles. A man at the register glanced at the edge of her tattoo as she reached for her wallet, his eyes widening. She pulled her sleeve down quickly, but it didn't matter. The secret was gone. At the tavern that night, regulars filled the booths, their voices hushed. Some approached her with quiet respect, others kept their distance, unsure what to say. She hated the attention, hated the way it felt like a spotlight on wounds she tried so hard to keep in the dark. When she slipped into the storeroom to breathe, she found Murphy waiting with 2 mugs of coffee. "You don't owe them explanations," he said, handing her one. "But now they'll expect them," she replied. "Maybe. Or maybe they'll just need someone to remind them they're not alone." She frowned. "You think a tattoo makes me a role model?" "I think scars do," Murphy said quietly. "And you've got plenty." That night, as she tried to sleep, the nightmares returned. The same time, the same screams, the same sand. She woke gasping at 3:17 a.m., clutching her sheets like a lifeline. She pressed her palms into her face, fighting the old instinct to bury it all, to choke it down. But something was different now. Rex's threat echoed in her mind. "You'll regret showing that tattoo." He thought exposure was weakness. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe showing it was the only way forward. 2 nights later she proved it. The tavern was half full, the regulars nursing drinks and murmuring about Rex's promise of revenge. When Maya walked out from behind the bar in a plain black tank top, the room went silent. For the first time since Kandahar, She let her tattoos stay uncovered, her scars visible in the warm light. No one jeered. No one mocked. They just watched, and then slowly conversations began again. Softer this time, different. A few veterans in the corner lifted their glasses toward her in quiet salute. One older man, his navy cap pulled low, nodded with tears in his eyes. It wasn't celebration. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. Murphy caught her eye from across the bar, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. She didn't smile back, but she didn't look away either. Rex's shadow still loomed over them. She knew he would return, that men like him didn't swallow humiliation easily. But for the first time, Maya didn't feel like she was hiding. And that, she realized, was a different kind of fight. The first snow of the season drifted down in heavy flakes, dusting Main Street with white. Murphy's Tavern glowed warmly against the storm, its neon sign buzzing like always. Inside, the air was thick with the hum of conversation. Regulars leaned close, their voices low, the memory of Rex's outburst still hanging in the back of every mind. Maya wiped down the bar with steady hands, though her ears stayed alert. Every time the door creaked, she glanced up, half expecting to see him swagger back in. He hadn't returned yet, but she knew men like Rex didn't forget humiliation. They stewed in it. They sharpened it into knives. The veterans in the corner had started coming more often. 4 men and 1 woman, all different ages, all carrying the same shadow in their eyes. They came for the coffee more than the beer, for the silence that wasn't really silence but something closer to understanding. Maya didn't join their table, but she listened. She saw herself in them. The restless hands, the stiff shoulders, the haunted glances at the door. That night, as she refilled their mugs, one of the men, a young Marine with a scar along his jawline, spoke quietly. "We heard about what you did. About Rex." Maya stiffened. "That wasn't for show." He nodded. "Didn't look like a show. Looked like someone who finally stopped letting other people define her." She didn't reply. She just poured the coffee and walked back behind the bar. But his words stayed with her. The peace shattered 3 nights later. It was late, the tavern winding down, when the door slammed open. Cold air gusted in, followed by heavy boots. Rex strode inside, his arm still bandaged from the fight, his face twisted with fury. 2 of his men flanked him, leather vests gleaming under the dim lights. Conversations died instantly. The jukebox's low hum was the only sound. Rex scanned the room, his eyes locking on Maya. He smirked, though it looked more like a snarl. "There she is," he said loudly, his voice carrying through the tavern. "The hero." Murphy stepped forward, his cane planted firm. "You're not welcome here, Rex. You know that." Rex's gaze didn't leave Maya. "You think you embarrassed me? You think you can humiliate me in front of my crew and walk away?" He leaned on the bar, his face inches from hers. "That tattoo won't protect you forever." Maya stood still, her expression calm but her muscles coiled. "Leave," she said simply. He laughed, a harsh grating sound. "Or what? You'll twist my arm again? You think one trick makes you untouchable?" The veterans in the corner shifted. The Marine with the scar clenched his jaw, his fists tightening on the table. The older Navy vet leaned forward, his eyes locked on Rex. Murphy's voice cut in. "This isn't your playground anymore. Get out." Rex slammed his hand on the bar, the sound sharp as a gunshot. "You think you can turn this place into some kind of shrine? You think you can make these people look up to you? You're nothing but a broken soldier playing pretend." The words sliced through her, sharper than she wanted to admit. Broken soldier. It was the thought that haunted her most in the quiet hours of the night. She drew in a breath, steadying herself. "I'm not pretending," she said softly but firmly. "I survived. That's more than you'll ever understand." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Rex sneered, pulling a knife from his belt and slamming it into the counter with a thud. Gasps rippled through the room. The blade quivered, catching the dim light. "You think you scare me?" he hissed. "Prove it." For a moment Maya considered it. She could disarm him. She could drop him to the floor in seconds. Her training hadn't left her. It never would. But something inside her shifted. This wasn't just about her anymore. She glanced at the veterans in the corner, their eyes wide, their hands trembling. She thought of the people who had begun to come here not for drinks, but for refuge. If she gave Rex the fight he wanted, she'd only prove his point, that violence ruled, that scars meant war instead of survival. So she stepped back, her voice steady. I don't need to fight you to beat you. Everyone here sees you for what you are. Rex's face darkened, but before he could move, the Marine with the scar stood. His voice shook, but it was loud enough to carry. You need to leave. Rex turned surprised. The older Navy vet stood too, then the woman, then the others. One by one, more patrons rose from their seats. Not with weapons, not with violence, but with presence. You heard her, Murphy said, his voice rough with pride. This isn't your place anymore. For the first time Rex faltered. He looked around the room at the wall of faces turned toward him, not afraid, not backing down. His smirk slipped. With a snarl, he yanked the knife from the counter and stormed toward the door. This isn't over, he spat, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled in its frame. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then slowly people sat back down. Conversation rose again, softer, steadier. Maya exhaled, her body finally unclenching. She caught the Marine's eye and gave a small nod. He nodded back. Later, as she closed up with Murphy, she stared at the knife mark gouged into the bar. It would never come out, no matter how much she sanded. Murphy noticed her gaze. Leave it, he said. It's part of the story now. Maya touched the scar in the wood, then looked at the tattoo on her arm. Both were marks of survival. Both were reminders that hiding didn't protect you. Standing did. And as much as she wanted peace, she knew Rex was right about one thing. This wasn't over. The tavern was quiet after Rex's second outburst, but the quiet wasn't peace. It was the kind of stillness that followed a storm, when everyone knew the air still held lightning. Murphy pretended to polish glasses behind the bar, though his hands trembled just enough for Maya to notice. The veterans lingered in their booth longer than usual, watching her with eyes that carried questions they didn't yet ask. By morning the town was buzzing. News traveled faster than the winter wind. Rex pulling a knife in Murphy's tavern was a story people carried to grocery aisles, gas pumps, and church pews. Some whispered in fear, convinced violence would come next. Others spoke with pride. Maya stood tall again. Didn't even flinch. But Maya felt no pride. She stood at her kitchen sink upstairs, scrubbing the same cup over and over until her knuckles ached. The word Rex had thrown at her, broken, echoed in her mind. He had meant it to wound, but the truth was she already carried that fear inside her. Murphy knocked on her door later that day, stepping in without waiting for an answer. You're beating that cup to death, he said, easing into a chair with a groan. She set the cup down. He'll be back. He won't stop until he proves something. Maybe. Murphy rubbed his knee, stiff from the cold. But you've got something he doesn't, people. Last night proved it. When you stood down, they stood up. That wasn't weakness, Maya. That was leadership. She shook her head. I wasn't leading. I was trying not to break. Same thing, Murphy said. Sometimes leadership is just holding the line long enough for someone else to step forward. The words stayed with her that night as she worked behind the bar. The veterans came again, more of them this time. Jessica walked in, young, tired, her medic's uniform replaced with a heavy coat. She hesitated at the door until Maya waved her over. They sat in a booth, the low light flickering across Jessica's face. She looked smaller than before, her eyes shadowed. I heard what happened, she said softly. I almost didn't come. Thought maybe. I don't know, this was a bad idea. Maya studied her. And yet you're here. Jessica's voice cracked. I don't know where else to go. Maya reached across the table, her hand resting lightly on Jessica's trembling fingers. Then this is exactly where you belong. That night, for the first time, Maya didn't just listen. She spoke. Not the sanitized pieces of her past she sometimes shared, but the real parts, the explosion in Kandahar, the faces she still saw every time she closed her eyes, the nights she woke at 3:17 with her sheets clenched in her fists. The veterans listened in silence. When she finished, the Marine with the scar nodded slowly. I thought I was the only one, he whispered. You're not, Maya said simply. That night marked the beginning of something new. Thursday evenings became more than just drinks and murmured stories. They became circles, people pulling their chairs together, speaking truths they hadn't spoken aloud in years. The tavern transformed, bit by bit, into something it had never been meant to be but always needed to become. Murphy started keeping coffee brewing in large pots, pouring mugs like medicine. Families began to appear, 2 wives, husbands, children sitting quietly listening. The wall of honor grew with photos, names scribbled underneath in hurried handwriting. Some were alive. Some were memorials. All were stories that belonged. But Rex's shadow lingered. His men were spotted outside sometimes, their motorcycles growling as they idled down the street. Flyers appeared on telephone poles. Fake hero. Can't save everyone. Someone slipped one under the tavern's door one morning, the words sharp enough to reopen old wounds. Murphy found Maya staring at it, her jaw clenched. "Don't give him that power," he said. "It's not just him," she admitted. "He's only saying out loud what I already think." Murphy's hand landed gently on her shoulder. "And what do you hear louder, his voice or theirs?" He gestured to the circle of veterans gathering in the main room. She looked through the doorway at Jessica laughing softly with the Marine, at the older Navy vet wiping his eyes but smiling. Their voices rose like a low hum, steady and alive. For the first time she realized Murphy was right. One snowy evening, the tavern was fuller than ever. Veterans from towns 2 hours away had made the trip. Jessica asked if she could lead that night's circle, her voice steadier now. Maya nodded, settling into a seat beside Murphy as Jessica spoke with calm authority, guiding others to share. Maya felt something shift in her chest as she listened. Leadership wasn't about standing in the center. It was about making space for others to stand too. But the peace didn't last. The front door burst open mid-meeting, cold wind whipping through. Rex's voice cut through the room. "You think you can turn this dump into a church?" He strode in with 3 men behind him, each one larger than the next. "You think a scarred-up soldier makes you saints?" The circle froze, fear flickering in eyes that had only just begun to trust. Maya rose slowly, her tattoo catching the light. "You're not welcome here," she said, her voice even. Rex sneered. "You gonna make me leave? In front of your little fan club?" He turned to the veterans, pointing. "She doesn't care about you. She's using you to make herself feel whole." Anger surged in her, but before she could speak, Jessica stood. Her voice shook, but it carried. "She's not using us. She's saving us." The Marine with the scar rose next, then the Navy vet, then others. One by one they stood, their silence stronger than any threat. Rex's smirk faltered. For the second time, he felt the weight of a room that no longer feared him. He spat on the floor, glaring at Maya. "This isn't over." And with that, he stormed out once more, the slam of the door echoing like a gunshot. The circle didn't break. If anything, it tightened. Murphy leaned toward Maya, his voice low. "He'll come back again. Men like him don't quit." Maya nodded. Her pulse was steady now, her fear dulled by something stronger. "Then we'll be ready." Snow had piled high against the tavern windows by the time Friday night came. The roads outside were slick with ice, the kind of cold that crept through coats and gloves, but inside Murphy's tavern, the heat of conversation kept the chill at bay. Veterans filled every booth, families huddled near the fireplace, and the air buzzed with something that felt almost like hope. But beneath it all ran a current of unease. Rex's second intrusion had rattled everyone. Even laughter sounded different now, quick and nervous, like people were waiting for the door to slam open again. Maya poured coffee behind the bar, her movements sharp, controlled. She hadn't slept much since Rex's last visit. His words circled in her head, "She's using you. She doesn't care." She knew they weren't true, but the echo of them touched an old wound. Every night she replayed Kandahar, the explosion, the soldiers she couldn't save. Survivors always carried that guilt, no matter how many people told them it wasn't their fault. Murphy noticed. He always did. "You're running yourself ragged," he said as he wiped down the counter. "That man's poison. You let it sit too long, it'll rot you from the inside." She shot him a look. "You think I don't know that? I think you've been carrying more than anyone should," Murphy replied. "And I think you're forgetting. This place isn't just about you anymore." Before she could answer, the tavern door opened. This time it wasn't Rex. It was a group of men and women bundled in coats, their eyes wary but determined. veterans from the next county over. They had heard about the Thursday meetings and wanted to see for themselves. The tavern buzzed with energy that night. Circles formed in every corner. People shared memories they had kept locked away for decades. Jessica led one group, guiding them with a steady hand. The Marine with the scar told his story for the first time. Tears were shed. Laughter broke out. For a few hours the weight lifted. But outside Rex was circling. One of his men was spotted across the street, smoking a cigarette, watching the tavern's windows. A truck rumbled slowly past twice, headlights sweeping the walls like searchlights. Maya felt the eyes on them even as she poured drinks. Late that night, after the last patron left, she found a note tucked under the tavern door. The handwriting was jagged, rushed. "This ends soon." She crumpled it in her fist, her jaw tight. The next morning Murphy found her at the counter, staring at the knife scar gouged deep in the wood. "You can't fight shadows," he said softly. She shook her head. "I'm not afraid of him." "I know you're not," Murphy said. "But fear isn't the point. He wants to drag you back into violence. If you give him that, he wins." She said nothing, but inside a storm raged. Part of her wanted to end it. Confront Rex, finish the fight once and for all. Another part of her knew Murphy was right. This wasn't just about her anymore. Every decision she made rippled outward to the people who now looked to her for strength. The decision came to a head a week later. It was a Thursday, the tavern packed tighter than ever. Veterans spilled into the parking lot, their breath visible in the freezing air. Jessica stood confidently at the front of one circle, guiding people through the hardest truths. Maya moved among the groups, listening, steadying, offering what she could. That's when the roar of engines shattered the night. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. The tavern windows rattled as the steel wolves pulled up, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Rex led them, his face twisted in a grin that didn't reach his eyes. The veterans froze. Families clutched each other. The hum of conversation died instantly. Maya walked to the door and stepped outside into the cold. The parking lot glowed under the harsh lights of the bikes, breath hanging in clouds. Rex swung off his motorcycle, his boots crunching in the snow. "Thought you could make me disappear," he called. "Thought you could take what's mine and turn it into some kind of circus?" "This was never yours," Maya said. Her voice was calm, but her heart hammered. Rex pulled a chain from his pocket, the metal links clinking in the night. "You embarrassed me twice. You think I'll let it stand? Tonight you pay." The bikers behind him revved their engines, the roar filling the air. Before Maya could answer, movement stirred behind her. The tavern door opened. The Marine with the scar stepped out. Then Jessica. Then Murphy leaning on his cane. One by one, veterans poured into the parking lot, forming a line beside her. Rex laughed harshly. "You think this little army scares me?" "They're not an army," Maya said. "They're a family. Something you'll never have." The silence that followed was heavier than the snow. For a moment it seemed Rex might attack. His grip on the chain tightened, his jaw clenched. But then he looked around, at the veterans standing firm, at the quiet defiance in their eyes. He saw a fight he couldn't win, not because they were armed, but because they weren't afraid of him anymore. His sneer faltered. He spat into the snow and swung back onto his bike. "This isn't over," he growled. The engines roared again, and the wolves tore off into the night, their noise fading into the distance. Maya stood still, her breath misting in the cold. Jessica stepped closer, her voice low but steady. "You didn't fight him. And still you won." Maya's chest rose and fell slowly. For the first time she believed it. Inside, the tavern erupted with energy. People hugged, clapped shoulders, spoke louder than they had before. Something had shifted. Rex's shadow still lingered, but his power was broken. He had tried to tear the place apart and had only made it stronger. Later, when the room quieted and the veterans had gone home, Maya sat at the bar with Murphy. He poured them both coffee, his hand steady. "You realize what happened tonight?" he said. She shook her head. "Feels like nothing changed. He's still out there." Murphy's smile was faint but sure. "What changed is you. And them. He wanted fear. You gave them strength." Maya looked around the room. The scarred tables, the wall of honor, the circle of chairs still in place. For the first time she saw the tavern not just as a hiding place but as something alive, something bigger than any one of them. She touched her tattoo absent-mindedly, the ink cool under her fingers. For years she'd seen it as a burden, a reminder of pain. Now it felt like something else. A banner. Promise. And deep down she knew Murphy was right. Tonight had changed everything. The days after the standoff felt different. Murphy's Tavern, once just another weathered bar on Main Street, hummed with a new kind of energy. The scar in the wood where Rex had slammed his knife was still there. But instead of fear, it sparked conversation. People spoke of that night like they had witnessed a shift in gravity. One woman against a gang, standing firm without throwing a punch, backed by a community that refused to scatter. Word spread beyond the town. First it was local reporters, then regional papers. Headlines painted Murphy's Tavern as a sanctuary for veterans. News vans parked along the curb, cameras pointed at the neon sign. Customers walked in with phones recording, snapping pictures of the Wall of Honor. Maya hated it. The spotlight felt suffocating, dragging into the open all the pieces of her she had fought to keep private. She never wanted to be the face of anything. But the tavern wasn't just hers anymore. She couldn't tell strangers to leave when veterans were driving 2 hours just to sit in the Thursday night circle. One evening she found Jessica at the bar, leafing through a notebook filled with scribbled notes. "What's that?" Maya asked, setting a tray of empty mugs aside. Jessica smiled faintly. "I've been keeping track, names, numbers, stories people share. Thought maybe we could organize them better. You know, so no one slips through the cracks." Maya studied her. Jessica's voice no longer carried the tremor it once had. Her eyes were steady. "You're really doing this," Maya said softly. Jessica's expression grew serious. "You showed me it was possible. Now it's my turn to help carry it." The weight in Maya's chest loosened a little. She wasn't alone anymore, not really. That Thursday the tavern overflowed. Murphy had to borrow chairs from the church down the street. Veterans filled every corner, their stories rising like a tide. Some were raw with grief, others etched with humor, but all were honest. For once honesty didn't feel dangerous. When Maya finally spoke, she didn't talk about Kandahar or her scars. She talked about the present, the weight of surviving, the pressure of living when others didn't. "We don't heal by hiding," she said, her voice low but clear. "We heal by standing next to each other, by sharing the weight until it feels lighter." The room stilled, then filled with nods, murmurs of agreement. Someone started clapping, and soon the whole tavern joined in, not for her, but for what they were building together. The next morning Murphy found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a letter from a veterans nonprofit in the city. They wanted to visit, to learn from what was happening here. They called it the Murphy model. Murphy chuckled when he showed Maya. "Never thought my name would be on a model," he said, scratching his beard. "Guess I'll take it." But Maya felt her stomach tighten. A model meant replication, scaling, more eyes, more attention. "This isn't a project," she said firmly. "This is just us." Murphy shrugged. "Sometimes just us is exactly what people are looking for." A week later a television crew arrived. Bright lights filled the tavern, reporters asking questions Maya didn't want to answer. They filmed the Wall of Honor, the circle of veterans, even the old jukebox in the corner. When they pointed a microphone at her, she froze. Jessica stepped forward. "She doesn't need to say anything," she told the reporter. "This place speaks for itself." The segment aired that night. By morning the phone rang nonstop. Veterans from other states called, asking how they could start their own circles. A woman from Chicago left a message in tears, saying her son had taken his life last year, and wishing he had had a place like Murphy's Tavern. Maya listened to the voicemail twice, her chest tight. She realized then that whether she liked it or not, this was bigger than her. But with growth came pushback. Flyers reappeared, uglier this time. Hero or fraud? Exploiting scars for sympathy. Online, trolls flooded comment sections, accusing her of chasing fame. Some veterans outside the circle sneered, insisting real strength meant silence. One night after closing, Maya sat alone at the bar scrolling through the comments until her vision blurred. The words cut deeper than she wanted to admit. Broken. Fraud. Weak. Murphy shuffled in, cane tapping. He didn't need to ask, he saw it on her face. "Don't mistake noise for truth," he said. They don't know me, she muttered. They don't need to, Murphy replied. The people who matter already do. Jessica walked in just then, a folder in her hand. We got invited to a conference next month. They want us to talk about community healing. Maya looked between them, the folder heavy in Jessica's hands, Murphy's steady gaze on her. She wanted to refuse to crawl back into the shadows. But she thought of the woman from Chicago, the son she had lost. She thought of the Marine with the scar of Jessica, of the circles that had started to bloom because she had finally stopped hiding. She took the folder. All right, she said quietly. We'll go. That night, she stood at the wall of honor, tracing her fingers over the photos. She whispered the names she remembered from Kandahar, the ones she carried every day. For the first time, speaking them aloud didn't feel like reopening a wound. It felt like honoring them. The tavern had given her back something she thought she'd lost forever. Her voice. And now it seemed the world wanted to hear it. Still, as she turned off the lights and headed upstairs, she couldn't shake the shadow that lingered at the back of her mind. Rex was still out there, nursing his rage, waiting for his moment. And Maya knew that when he returned, it wouldn't just be her fight. It would be theirs. The conference was held in a hotel ballroom 2 towns over. Rows of chairs faced a stage lit by spotlights that made the air feel too bright, too polished. Maya tugged at the sleeves of her blazer, the fabric stiff against her arms. She hated suits. They felt like armor that didn't protect anything. Jessica stood beside her, clutching her notes, steady but nervous. Murphy waited in the wings, his cane tapping a slow rhythm on the floor. He had insisted on coming, saying the tavern was as much his story as hers. When Maya stepped onto the stage, the applause hit her like a wave. It wasn't the roar of a barroom. It was polite, organized, but it still made her chest tighten. She gripped the podium, the microphone too close to her mouth. Murphy's Tavern wasn't supposed to be anything special, she began, her voice low. It was just a place to drink, to forget. But it became something else. It became a place where silence broke. She talked about the circles, about the veterans who came back week after week, about Jessica leading when Maya couldn't, about Murphy's steady hand. She didn't use grand words. She just told the truth. And when she finished, the room stood. The applause wasn't polite this time. It was loud, raw, filled with something like gratitude. Backstage, Jessica beamed. You did it, she said. Maya shook her head. We did. But outside the ballroom, a different scene unfolded. A man slipped flyers under windshield wipers in the parking lot. The same jagged handwriting as before: fraud, liar, stolen valor. Rex hadn't disappeared. He was circling closer again. Back at the tavern, things grew busier by the week. Out-of-towners crowded the booths, reporters hovered with cameras, and donations started arriving unasked for. Murphy muttered that he didn't know what to do with all the envelopes stuffed with cash, so he bought more chairs, more coffee pots, and a second jukebox that played softer songs. But growth came with cracks. Some locals muttered that the tavern wasn't theirs anymore, that it belonged to outsiders now. Others resented the spotlight, whispering that Maya had built herself a stage on the back of their quiet town. One night, after the crowd had thinned, Maya sat at the bar staring at another hateful flyer someone had slipped under the door. The words blurred, but she didn't need to read them. She already knew what they said. Murphy sat beside her, sipping coffee. He's trying to drag you into the mud, he said. You can't fight there. He knows you'll drown in it. I can't ignore it either, she replied. If I let him spread lies, people will believe him. Murphy shook his head. The people who matter? They don't need convincing. They've seen you. Still, the doubt gnawed. She thought about Williams from Kandahar, about the men she hadn't saved. Maybe Rex was right. Maybe she was a fraud, a symbol people built because they needed one, not because she deserved it. The darkness broke in a way no one expected. It was a Thursday night, the tavern louder than usual. Jessica had just finished guiding a circle when the door burst open. Rex stood there, but this time he wasn't smirking. His face was hard, his eyes cold. Behind him, more wolves poured in, filling the entryway with leather and steel. The room froze. Rex held up a phone, shaking it in the air. "You think you're untouchable now? Look at this." On the screen was a video. Maya stumbling through a nightmare, shouting in her sleep drenched in sweat. Someone had filmed her through her upstairs window. Gasps rippled through the room. Maya's stomach lurched. That window was supposed to be hers, her one safe place. "You see," Rex sneered. "Your hero isn't strong. She's broken, crying in the dark like the rest of you. And you follow her." Maya's knees threatened to buckle. Shame surged hot through her, raw and blinding. For a moment she wanted to disappear, to run, to let the floor swallow her whole. Then Jessica stepped forward. Her voice was clear, sharp. "She has nightmares because she's lived through hell. And she's still here. That doesn't make her weak. That makes her stronger than you'll ever be." The Marine with the scar rose too. "You think showing us she's human will break us? We've all been there. We've all screamed in the dark. That's why we're here." The veterans began to stand, one after another, until nearly the whole tavern was on its feet. The energy shifted. Shame replaced with solidarity, weakness with defiance. Maya's hands still shook, but something inside her steadied. She stepped forward, her voice low but strong. "You thought exposing my scars would shame me, but they're not yours to use. They're mine. And every person here knows what it means to carry scars." Rex's face twisted, his victory stolen before it began. He hurled the phone to the floor, the glass shattering across the wood. "You'll regret this," he growled. But the tavern didn't flinch. For the first time Rex looked small, surrounded not by fear but by people who refused to bow. He turned and stormed out, his men trailing after him. The slam of the door echoed, but this time it didn't shake anyone. Later, when the tavern quieted, Maya sat with Jessica in the back booth. The young woman's hands were steady as she held hers. "He tried to use your scars against you," Jessica said softly. "But they only made us stronger." Maya nodded slowly. She felt raw, exposed, but also lighter. Rex had taken her privacy, but in doing so, he had stripped away the last thing she was hiding. There was nothing left to conceal. Only the truth. Murphy shuffled over, setting 2 mugs on the table. "Scars aren't secrets," he said. "They're stories. And tonight, yours told the truth louder than he ever could." For the first time in weeks, Maya felt something close to peace. Not because the fight was over, it wasn't, but because she realized she wasn't fighting alone anymore. The tavern wasn't just standing against Rex. It was standing for something bigger. And that, she thought, might be the one thing he could never break. Snow melted into slush along Main Street as winter gave way to early spring. The days grew longer, the air lighter, but inside Murphy's tavern, the changes felt deeper than the seasons. The circles weren't just Thursday nights anymore. They were every night, in every booth, veterans leaning close over mugs of coffee, shoulders easing as the weight they carried slipped out in stories. The tavern had become something alive, something no one could have predicted. National nonprofits sent letters of support. Universities asked Maya to speak. Donations poured in from strangers who had never set foot inside. People who had lost brothers, daughters, fathers to silence. But with every step forward, the spotlight burned brighter. Cameras followed Maya when she walked to the grocery store. Reporters camped on the sidewalk. Her face appeared in magazines she had never read. She hated it, but Jessica reminded her, "It's not about you anymore. It's about what you've started." Still the attention gnawed. One night, flipping through channels in her apartment above the tavern, Maya froze at a segment on national news. They called her the reluctant face of a movement. They showed her tattoo, her scarred arms, her quiet defiance. Then they cut to a different voice. Rex Morrison, sitting on the hood of his bike, his face half in shadow. "She's no hero," he sneered. "She's a fraud. Using a tattoo to play soldier when real men died doing the work." The words stabbed sharper than she expected. He wasn't just haunting her tavern anymore. He was shaping her story in front of the whole country. The tension came to a head 2 weeks later. Murphy's Tavern hosted its biggest gathering yet. Nearly 100 veterans, plus families and supporters who drove from 3 states away. The air was crowded, alive with the hum of voices. People spilled into the parking lot, camp chairs set up under strings of lights Murphy had hung just the day before. Maya moved through the crowd like a thread, shaking hands, listening, offering quiet words. Jessica handled the schedule, organizing smaller circles, making sure no one was left out. Murphy leaned on his cane behind the bar, grumbling but smiling, pouring more coffee than beer these days. It should have been a night of celebration. Instead, the wolves arrived. Engines roared down the street, louder than the music, vibrating through the floorboards. Dozens of bikers pulled up, leather glinting, headlights cutting the dark. They lined the street like a wall, their presence undeniable. Rex stepped forward, chain swinging in his hand. His voice carried over the crowd. "You think you've won? You think your little sob circles make you strong?" He spat on the pavement. "You're nothing but broken dogs licking each other's wounds." The crowd tensed. Some shrank back, others stood taller. Maya felt the heat of fear rising, but also something else. A steady thrum of defiance running through the people beside her. She stepped forward, the lights catching her tattoo. "We're not broken," she said, her voice cutting clear. "We're alive. And we're not afraid of you." Murmurs rippled, then grew louder, voices rising in agreement. The veterans stood shoulder to shoulder, the families behind them. A wall of presence that no chain could cut through. Rex's smirk faltered. He swung the chain once, but no one moved. Not even the youngest veterans in the circle. The wolves shifted uneasily. This wasn't the barroom brawl they'd come for. This was a community unshaken. Murphy's voice rang out from behind the bar. "You've already lost, Rex. Every time you show up, you remind us who we're not. And every time we stand taller." The words landed heavier than fists. Rex's sneer twisted into rage. "This isn't over," he spat, backing toward his bike. But the words felt emptier this time. His gang followed, engines roaring. But their noise didn't drown out the cheers that erupted behind him. That night, when the tavern finally quieted, Maya sat at the wall of honor. The photos had grown, faces she'd never met, names sent by families across the country. She traced the edges of a new picture, a young soldier barely 20. His mother had mailed it with a note that said simply, "Thank you for giving his name a place to live." Jessica joined her, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "You realize what's happening here, right? It's not just a tavern anymore. It's a movement." Maya shook her head. "Movements have leaders." "I'm not." She trailed off, staring at the tattoo on her arm. "I'm just someone who survived." Jessica's gaze was steady. "That's exactly why you have to lead." The weight of it pressed heavy, but beneath it was something else, resolve. Maybe Murphy had been right all along. Scars weren't weakness. They were stories. And if hers could carry others, maybe that was the point. A week later, the invitation came. A national town hall, televised, dedicated to veterans' voices. They wanted Maya to speak. Her stomach dropped when she read it. Cameras, lights, millions watching. The same spotlight she had fought so hard to avoid. But then she thought of the young Marine with the scar, of Jessica standing tall, of the woman in Chicago who left the voicemail about her son. She thought of the pictures on the wall, the names whispered into the tavern air. She called Jessica and Murphy into the back booth. "We'll go," she said quietly. "Not because I want to, but because they need to hear us." Murphy nodded, pride soft in his eyes. Jessica squeezed her hand. For the first time, Maya felt the weight of her fear settle into something steadier. Not gone, not quiet, but manageable. The fight with Rex wasn't finished. She knew that. But tonight had proven something more important. He couldn't win. Not because she was stronger than him, but because she wasn't fighting alone anymore. And that, she realized, was what scared him most. The studio lights were blinding, hotter than desert sun. Maya sat in a chair on a raised platform, her blazer buttoned tight, her tattoo hidden beneath fabric. Across from her, a row of cameras pointed like rifles. The red recording light blinked, and the town hall began. The moderator welcomed her with polished words, then opened the floor to veterans across the country who had tuned in. Some appeared on screens, others stood in the audience. One by one, voices broke through the silence. An older woman who had served in Vietnam, a young man who admitted he hadn't slept a full night in years, a father holding a photo of his daughter lost to her own hand. Maya listened more than she spoke, her hands folded tightly in her lap. When she did answer, she didn't speak like a politician or an expert. She spoke like she always did, plain and direct. "I'm not here to give solutions," she said. "I'm here to say we don't have to carry it alone. Silence doesn't heal. Community does." Applause broke out, stronger than she expected. The cameras captured it, streaming her words into millions of homes. By the end of the night, social media swelled with clips of her steady voice, her quiet strength. She had become, without trying, the face of something larger than Murphy's Tavern. But not everyone was clapping. Back in her hotel room, the glow of the city lights spilling through the curtains, Maya scrolled through her phone. Praise filled her inbox, messages from strangers calling her an inspiration. But woven between them were threats. Dozens of them. "Liar. Stolen valor. Will shut you down." Her stomach twisted when she saw the name at the bottom of one message. Rex Morrison. The words were simple, typed in capital letters. "Tomorrow night. The tavern burns." Her chest clenched, and for the first time in months, fear pressed in heavier than resolve. She called Murphy immediately. His voice was calm but firm. "We'll be ready," he said. "He thinks he can scare us into hiding. He's wrong." Jessica grabbed the phone next. "We won't let him win, Maya. Not now." Still, when Maya lay in the hotel bed that night, sleep didn't come. She saw the tavern in flames, the photos on the wall of honor curling into ash, the voices silenced. She had built this place as a sanctuary, and now it was a target. The next evening, she drove back into town. The tavern glowed against the dusk, but it wasn't business as usual. Veterans stood outside in clusters, some in uniform jackets, some in plain clothes, their faces set in grim determination. Murphy leaned on his cane by the door, greeting each person with a nod. Jessica moved between groups, her notepad forgotten, her focus on keeping everyone steady. Inside, the tavern was quiet but tense. The jukebox was off, the coffee pots full, chairs arranged in circles that no one sat in. Everyone was waiting. Maya stepped through the door, and all eyes turned to her. She had no speech prepared, no grand plan. She only said what was true. "He wants us to scatter. He wants fear. Don't give it to him." The room murmured in agreement, but the tension didn't ease. It sat heavy in the air, every sound from outside making heads turn. At 9 o'clock, the roar of engines filled the street. Dozens of motorcycles lined the block, their headlights blazing like a wall of fire. The wolves had come in force. Rex stepped forward, a gas can in his hand, his grin sharp and hungry. "I told you this ends tonight." The veterans shifted, forming a line at the tavern door. No weapons, no fists raised, just presence. The chain of men and women stood shoulder to shoulder, their scars visible, their silence stronger than any roar. Maya stepped outside, the cold air biting her skin. She faced Rex directly, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "You burn this place and you prove what we already know. You've got nothing but destruction. You'll still lose. Because what we've built isn't wood and walls. It's here." She touched her chest, then gestured to the people behind her. "And you can't burn that." For a moment Rex faltered. His hand tightened on the gas can, his jaw clenched. He wanted violence. He wanted fear. But none came. The veterans behind Maya began to hum softly, an old cadence, a tune from training grounds and long marches. More voices joined, low and steady, until the sound filled the street. It wasn't loud, but it was unshakable. A a reminder of who they were and what they had survived. Rex's sneer slipped. He swung the gas can once, then hurled it to the ground. Gas splashed across the pavement, the fumes sharp in the air. He pointed at Maya, his voice a growl. "This isn't over." Then he turned, mounting his bike, engines roaring as the wolves retreated into the night. The crowd exhaled as one, the tension breaking like a dam. Jessica stepped to Maya's side, her voice hushed but fierce. "He tried to burn us down. All he did was show how strong we are." Murphy shuffled closer, his cane sinking into the snow. "You've won something bigger than a fight tonight. You've won their fear." Maya stared at the spilled gas shimmering in the streetlights, her reflection fractured in the puddles. Rex wasn't finished, but something inside her had shifted. He could come back with fire, with chains, with noise, but every time he did, he only made them stronger. She turned back toward the tavern, the glow of its lights steady against the night. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, she believed the outcome wasn't in doubt. Because Rex was one man, and she was no longer alone. The town woke the next morning to the smell of gasoline still clinging to Main Street. The black stain on the pavement outside Murphy's tavern shimmered in the early sun like a scar that wouldn't wash away. People stopped to stare, whispering as they passed, some shaking their heads, others murmuring prayers. Inside, Maya sat at the bar, her coffee untouched. She had barely slept, her body still wired from the confrontation. Murphy moved behind the counter, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. Jessica scribbled furiously in her notebook at a corner table, already planning new safety measures. "We can't keep waiting for him to show up," Maya said finally. Her voice was low, but it carried in the quiet room. "He won't stop until he thinks he's won." Murphy nodded, his face grave. "Then it's time to end this." "How?" Jessica asked. Her pen stilled, her brow furrowed. Maya stared at the scarred bar where Rex's knife had once bitten deep. Not by fighting him. Not his way. That evening, the tavern filled to bursting. Not just veterans this time. Families, neighbors, townsfolk who had watched the events unfold from the sidelines, but could no longer stay away. The air buzzed with anticipation, with nerves. Word had spread. Tonight Maya would speak. When she stepped onto the small wooden stage Murphy had built years ago for local bands, the room hushed. She gripped the microphone, the weight of dozens of eyes on her. For once she didn't shrink from it. "Rex wants us afraid," she began, her voice steady. "He thinks if he shouts loud enough, swings his chain hard enough, he can drown us out. But what we've built here is louder. It's not fear. It's not silence. It's truth." She gestured to the wall of honor, now covered with photos from floor to ceiling. Every name, every face up there tells a story of survival and sacrifice. Those stories can't be burned. They can't be broken. And no one can take them from us. The crowd erupted in applause, cheers filling the tavern until the walls shook. Maya stepped back, her chest tight with something she hadn't felt in years, pride. But as the clapping faded, the tavern door slammed open. Rex stood in the doorway, his leather jacket streaked with dirt, his eyes wild. This time he wasn't alone. Two wolves dragged a canister between them, the metallic scrape sharp against the floor. "Gasoline. Again." "Enough speeches," Rex snarled. "Tonight it ends." The room froze. Mothers clutched children, veterans rose to their feet, ready to shield. Maya stepped down from the stage, her pulse steady despite the danger. "You think fire will end this?" she said, meeting his eyes. "Burn these walls and tomorrow we'll meet outside. Burn the street and we'll gather in the fields. Burn everything and we'll still be here, standing together. Because you can't burn what we are." For a moment Rex hesitated. His men looked uneasy, their grips on the canister loosening. The crowd didn't cower. They stood taller, stronger, eyes fixed not on fear but on him. Jessica's voice rang out. "You're the one who's afraid, Rex. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of being nothing." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Someone clapped, then another, until the tavern thundered with the sound. Not for Rex. For each other. Rex's face twisted. He grabbed the canister and lifted it, but before he could tip it, Murphy's voice boomed. Enough! The room stilled. Murphy leaned heavily on his cane, his voice sharp as steel. You've tried fists, knives, fire. And every time you've walked away smaller. Because you're not fighting Maya. You're fighting the truth. And the truth is, you've already lost. Rex's hand shook. His eyes darted around the room, searching for fear, for weakness. He found none. His men shifted uneasily. Then one dropped his grip on the canister. Another stepped back. Walk away, Maya said softly. It's the only fight you can win. For the first time, Rex looked unsure. His swagger cracked, his shoulders sagged. He dropped the canister with a dull thud, the gasoline sloshing inside. His men didn't follow as he turned and stumbled out the door, his boots dragging across the floorboards. Silence followed, heavy and stunned. Then slowly cheers erupted, filling the tavern until the rafters shook. Later that night, when the crowd had gone and the tavern was quiet again, Maya sat at the wall of honor. Jessica joined her, sliding down to sit on the floor. You ended it, Jessica said softly. Maya shook her head. We ended it. Together. Murphy settled into a chair nearby, his cane leaning against the wall. He'll never come back, he said with quiet certainty. Not because he can't, but because he knows there's nothing here for him. Only truth. Only strength. Maya traced a finger along one of the photos, whispering the name beneath it. For years she had thought survival meant hiding, shrinking, disappearing. But here, in this tavern filled with scars and stories, she had learned the opposite. Survival was standing. Survival was sharing. Survival was letting others carry the weight with you. She touched her tattoo, no longer a secret, no longer a burden. It wasn't just a mark of the past. It was a promise to herself, to the people who stood with her, to those who never made it home. As the tavern lights dimmed and the night settled outside, Maya finally felt it. Not just survival but peace. And she knew this was only the beginning.